Hello again, and welcome to episode 2 of Welcome to Successville. I'm Sophie Williams, and I'm trying to learn more about success by having conversations with my most successful friends to try to find out if success ever feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside, or if the whole thing is, in fact, secretly a scam. I'm also trying to learn new things, so I've recorded and edited all of season 1 myself because maybe learning new things is a success? I don't know. I'll let you know by the end of episode 10. My only flag about this episode is that I do very much have COVID during it. And you'll hear me mention that a few times. We recorded remotely, so I didn't get Ameena sick. And you'll be glad to know that this is the last of the COVID episodes. I rescheduled all of the others until I was better. So now let me introduce you to my successful guest, Ameena Hamid, and you can hear her thoughts about why finding stability within creativity is a success. Hello, lovely listeners. It's me, your friend and host, Sophie Williams, and this is Welcome to Successville, the podcast where every week I speak to a different successful guest and ask, what is success? How do you know when you've got it? And is it really all it's cracked up to be? This week, I'm thrilled to be joined by successful theatre producer, Ameena Hamid. Ameena is a London-based commercial producer, general manager, festival curator and facilitator. She runs Ameena Hamid Productions and co-founded HD General Management with Grace Dixon. She was named Best Producer at the Black British Theatre Awards 2022 for her work as producer on The Wiz with Hope Mill Theatre Manchester. Ameena was heralded as a true role model for future generations by Official London Theatre and was one of the Stage 25 2022 and the Stage 100 in 2023. At just 24, Ameena is the youngest producer and general manager currently working, having cut her teeth on Death Drop at the Garrick Theatre as an associate producer in 2020, the youngest woman ever to produce on the West End. She has worked as a theatre producer at Soho Theatre and is on the board of the League of Independent Producers. She holds a BSc in Social Anthropology with a first-class honours from the London School of Economics and Political Science in 2022. She has course credits from the National Theatre, RADA and Harvard University. Ameena, hello, and welcome to Successville.
Hello, this is very exciting. It's very weird to hear my own bio.
Well, actually, that's my very first question. And I should say for listeners, I currently have COVID. And so if I sound a little bit breathless or my voice sounds weird, please forgive me. But I didn't want to waste any of Ameena's time. So I put on some lipstick and we're having a chat. But yeah, Ameena, the first thing that I always ask people is, what is it like to have your bio read back to you? I know that when I go to things, when I'm doing events, I'm doing talks, I'm doing podcasts, that's always the first thing that happens, right? You sit there and someone reads off a list of your achievements. And granted, we generally write our own bios, so we know what's coming.
Yeah.
But I always find it a little tricky, I don't know what to do with my face or where to look, I think. How do you feel when your bio gets read out?
Yeah, I think I cringe a little, which is so funny because I have done all of those things and they're all facts, but it just feels like just so strange to like hear someone say, here's a CV of your work and what you've done and here's what people think about you. That is all true, but you know you've written it, you know you've put it all in one place and it feels very detached to who you are. It's good and it's useful because it's also a reminder that I've done quite a lot of stuff and I'm quite good at what I do. But I think just naturally, I'm not a person that's like, yeah, I've done that and that's great. Like if somebody asked me to read it, I'd have to say no. There is absolutely no way I could do that.
Really? You just be like, sorry, that's not happening.
Yeah. Every time I have to introduce myself or speak through things, even I have my bio open, but I consistently am accused of downplaying or not properly speaking through my bio because I find it really strange and it feels like showing off, even though I'd never say anything that's not true or accurate. It's just, it's really weird.
It is so weird, isn't it? For me, it's not a feeling of, oh, this feels made up. Like you're saying, everything on there is real and stuff that we've worked hard for and stuff that, we're proud of. But yeah, there is that feeling of showing off, I think is really interesting. And I wonder if everyone feels like that, or if that's a thing that more women feel, if that's a thing that more Black and global majority people feel. I wonder if different groups are differently used to like self-promotion in that way?
I think so. I think definitely. I mean, notoriously, women and particularly Black and global majority women have a tendency to be far overqualified for the jobs that they want. But it's not exclusive to certain groups. It's definitely something that feels pretty universal across people. I mean, there are also those amazing people that are great at just being like, here's all the stuff I've done and I'm really brilliant, and I'm incredibly envious of them.
Yeah. I also think it might be a British thing. So for a while I worked for a big streaming company and I was the only person in my team not in America or not culturally American. And they were so confident being like, I've done this and I've done this and I've done that. And I'd just be like, hello. Like, I don't think it necessarily fits very well with sort of British culture either, to be like, you know, really like, here's what I've done and here's why you should respect me and pay attention to me in this kind of way. We're going to talk about your very successful professional life in just a moment. But before we get to that, we usually start by looking back. So I'd love to talk to you about sort of Ameena as a young person. What was your relationship with success like as a child? Were you good at getting good grades? Were you winning awards? Did you have an idea of what success might mean for grown-up Ameena?
It's funny. I think I had quite a big life shift, and when I was a teenager, but I think ahead of that I was like going to a top university. Obviously not the case now, but I really wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger. I think in part because everyone told me I'd be good at it, and I was one of those, this is like, see, I was about to go, this is such a show-offy thing. It's not, it's just true.
Yeah.
But I was quite good at subjects across the board when I was younger, and I feel like I could have picked to go in any direction really. And very much sat more in the humanities side because it was what interested me. Everyone just sort of told me I'd be a good lawyer, and I did debating when I was younger. I was like, well, I'm going to go to a good university, and then I'm going to go to an American university, and I'm going to get dual qualifications, you know, really easy stuff in American British law. I'm going to work for the UN. It's going to be great. I'm going to be a human rights lawyer. And looking back on it now, I cried every results day. So like my GCSE results day, I cried. My A-level results day, I cried. And now I couldn't tell you what those grades were, but they were so important to me at the time. And it was so clear that, you know, going to this top university, I desperately wanted to get into Oxbridge and to study law there, and I didn't get in, and it was the worst thing that happened ever, and it was such a bad day, and I remember it, and I was doing my mock exams for my A-levels at the time, and I didn't get the offer, and I was crying, and my dad drove me home, and it was absolutely terrible, and it was like the 17-year-old's life was over. And 2 days later, we were informed that my older brother had passed away, and my world flipped on its head. And this idea that success is in the future and happiness is in the future, and none of that is right now, completely went away because my view of time and life changed so drastically. And I think I realized in that moment that actually really like what I wanted to be was happy. And that for me, and this is the thing I say a lot now, for me, success where it used to be about getting that top job or getting into that top university or having all of those accolades became so much more about just finding joy, because you don't know, like, and as flippant as it may sound, like you could get hit by a bus tomorrow, you know, you could go to sleep and not wake up. That's absolutely possible at any age. So just, I think that really changed what success meant to me, and really like stopped me from being so goal focused, and I started to focus more on the journey towards it, which has like generally been really positive for me, but has also meant that I have quite an interesting relationship with what success means, because as much as I can say that like success is happiness, like joy and happiness is really important to me, but I still have those ideas of, oh, this is what success looks like, or you're really successful.
That's such an amazing and in-depth answer, and there's so much to unpack in there. And it's so interesting because, of course, if you have someone who's close to you who you lose unexpectedly and when they're young, of course that idea of sort of the long term and the future and like sacrificing everything now for some potential gain later on must really force that sort of reshift and rethink in that framing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so interesting as well to hear that you cried every results day, but now can't remember those grades. Because I also remember being really disappointed by my GCSEs, and I'm 37 this year. And it's good that you don't remember. I can reel off absolutely what grades I got at GCSE like 20 years ago, because neither of my parents went to university. I'm pretty sure my dad didn't finish school. And so for them, they were like proud of my results and they were telling people. So for transparency, I got 1 A star, 3 A's, 6 B's and 3 C's. And I was devastated. I remember my parents telling like my aunts and uncles and people like, oh, she did this. And I remember just being like, how dare you? How dare you tell people my business? I found that like so disappointing.
You are where you are now and it didn't make any difference, but
No.
you know that when you are younger, that is everything to you. We put so much pressure on kids being like, this is going to decide your future. You have to make these massive decisions now. And like, you know, choosing what you're studying at university at 17 when you have so much of your life ahead of you, and also that like university might not be the best option for you, all of these things that we just don't give kids the like freedom to go, like, this is not the end. And just because you got like bad grades, which realistically so often people are like, I got really bad grades, and then you're like, you passed them. Like, you know, it doesn't really affect what you can do and what you can go on to do. And that dichotomy has always been really interesting to me. Because I absolutely understand being sat there and being like, my grades were the worst grades ever, and yet everyone else is like, they're really good, but they're not good enough for the standard that you're holding yourself to at the time, and they're not good enough for what future you want to be able to do. But it's too much pressure to put on young people that they do not need at a time that is so horrible. You could not pay me to be a teenager again.
No, yeah, absolutely. I'm from a really working class background. My dad is a grave digger and then a crematorium operator, and my mum is a cleaner. And I had this really strong idea that I had to be successful. I had to work hard. I had to do everything that I could, because if I didn't, I was going to be homeless. And that's really what motivated me my whole childhood. No one like reassured me. No one was like, this is going to be fine. Everyone was just like, yeah, I mean, if it makes her work hard, let her work hard. But I just think we could be better to kids than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And but you know, like, you don't really get taught anything in a way that is compassionate to the fact that you're a kid and you don't know that yet. And when I had to do my first self-assessment, I was like, why was this not taught to me at school? Because I have no idea what I'm doing, and I feel like the government are going to come after me. And it wasn't until like my lawyer and my accountant sat down with me and they were like, that's not going to happen. You're not going to commit fraud, so you'll be fine.
I love that you're like, in one breath you're like, I'm 24, then in another breath you're like, and I spoke to my lawyer and my accountant. A lot of people do not have that same sort of setup as you, and you're a business owner and you do all of this stuff. But before we get to talking about what you do now, which I think is incredible and I really want to highlight, I just want to talk a little bit more about that sort of young Ameena, because I think your parents are quite different to mine. I think your parents have very professional backgrounds. Do you think that their sort of expectations or what they'd been able to achieve impacted your desire to be a lawyer? Because you've ended up in a really creative space, which is quite different to that.
Yeah, I think so. I grew up very much middle class, and I went to a private school, and I think far too many people are weirdly apologetic about their upbringing, or, you know, I obviously didn't choose that. And to be honest, if I probably wouldn't choose it for my children, but not that I actually want any, but anyway. But I think it's important to say that. Also because quite a lot of people just assume that I'm working class, or assume that I'm from specific places. But they grew up very, very middle class. Both of my parents are doctors. They're also both first generation immigrants, and they came here from Sudan in the 80s to be doctors in the NHS. My mum has, the last time I counted, 6 degrees. There's a world where she has more now. She's one of the most qualified people I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
And I think growing up, there was a certain level of like, well, these are the jobs that we know and understand, and When I was trying to transition into a creative space, I think I resented that a bit. I resented that there was a push towards, well, you could still do a conversion course, or you could still do this, and you could still do law. And now looking back on it, I see that what really that was coming from was just, well, we understand that law is a job that you could do and you can get a paycheck for, and what we want for you is stability. And I understand that a lot more now. And it wasn't probably until I started working at Soho and I took them to see a show there. And it wasn't in a massive West End theatre. That was a whole different step. But it was in a theatre, and I had a job in a theatre working for someone. And then my dad like looked over some of my business accounts and he was like, oh, you get paid a reasonable salary. And that was like last year. And so it definitely took a while for them to understand that they don't maybe understand the industry, but it doesn't mean that it can't be a stable job for me and it can't be sustainable. And they love theatre and they're really supportive of it now. But when it maybe came across to me that they weren't being supportive, I understand now where that was coming from.
So I want to bring it a little bit more into sort of the present time and how we know each other. So I think we probably met in about 2021 or 2022 through a podcast. I was on a live recording of a podcast that you were involved in at the time. And I remember you coming up to me before I went on stage, and I had this big migraine and I was just like, in like ogre mode. But you came up to me and you said that you liked my work and you'd recognized me. And that was the first time, or at least one of the first times that had happened to me, that someone who I didn't know knew who I was. And I found that really surprising. And of course, we've kept in touch. But in keeping in touch, I've discovered what an amazing and interesting person you are and what's amazing stuff that you do. So I'm really glad that we had that moment of connection. And I think for you, that public recognition is something that you actually experienced from quite a young age, which is funny to say because, as you've mentioned, you are 24 and you've only recently turned 24. And when your birthday was coming up, you made a video talking about success and reflecting on your year and the last few years and how far you've come. Is that something that you do often on your birthdays? Do you use it as that time to sort of reflect and think about where you've come from and where you want to be?
I try to. And it's funny, every year it's a different thing that comes up. I think last year I was thinking a lot about my brother, and I was thinking about how proud he'd be of me, which I think of sometimes, and I think I sort of struggle with sort of going, oh, I'd be really proud of me. But I really felt it last year, and I'm not hugely spiritual, but it just really like hit me, and it felt like a kind of gift from him. Nice. And then this year, I think I was reflecting on it because I've been a lot more publicly quiet, I'd say. I have focused a lot more on rounding out my life and on sort of the things outside of work that I really care about, like learning to bake bagels, which has been really fun.
That's cool. Do you have to put them in water?
You do. You boil them for like a minute and then you bake them. It's like niche ingredients and it takes time, but it's quite an easy process.
But it's impressive. And maybe that's what success is. Just like doing something that you know is easy, but then other people are like,
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that's what it is. But yeah, I think more so than January is for me, it's a time for going, okay, well, what is it that I want out of this year, and what have I managed in the last year? And also coming up to 25, as like weird as that sounds, like it feels like a big birthday. I've put that in air quotes. And I think it was a really nice reflection because it was an understanding that having pushed myself to a lot of limits in a lot of time, and having this idea of, well, I might be running out of time, and these are all the things I want to do. I've slowed down quite a lot, and I've understood that you enjoy it more if you take the time, and it's been really nice to do that, and to spend more time with my friends and family, and to travel more, and to do less work that's paid better, and like all of these things that I think for a while I wasn't necessarily valuing myself or my time very highly, and I think I've started to do that a lot more, and I've changed my rates and all of these things, but I've also realized that actually I'd rather not spend my Sunday working, even if that means that I sit on the sofa and I watch Monk for 3 hours straight. I don't care. And that's been actually really lovely and really fulfilling in the last year, and I think has brought me a lot of joy.
It's so interesting that that's like a natural moment for it, but what that moment throws up for you will be different every time. And I really love that you have upped your rates and that you're doing less work but better paid work. For me, when I first realised that I was undercharging and that meant I had to do work that I didn't want to do, was a real like mind-blowing moment when I was just like, oh, I can do less of this without making any less money, without being any less secure. Like, that was a real mind-blowing moment for me.
Yeah. I think it's a really hard thing to do because valuing yourself feels so strange. I founded a new company a couple of years ago, and I think in doing that and it being about valuing both of our work, it was so much easier to go, oh, well, it's worth this. This is what it's worth, than it is when it's just me. And realizing that actually, like, I am part of that value for the company, and I have a lot of experience that I should be paid a day rate that's probably higher than someone who's just graduated, and that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that for you. And I love that there's always a moment, I think, that makes us think that. So I probably didn't set my rates as high as they are now until a client emailed me when I sent them a quote, and they were like, just so you know, we've also got quotes from this, and that person, and you are like 60% lower than the lowest one. And I really appreciated this man who I didn't know, who had never met me, just saying, just so you know, you deserve better than this. And I try and do that as often as I can for people now. If I get a low quote, like when I was looking for PR companies to work on my most recent book, whenever I get like a really low quote, it's almost always from a woman, and it's almost always from, as we were talking about earlier, Black and global majority women. And so I always try to go out of my way to say, we can get you more than this, you deserve more than this. But I think we need those external eyes to help us be comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk to you about visibility, because obviously your job as a producer is one that's lots of responsibility, but it can often be very behind the scenes. But as you mentioned, you actually started getting press attention quite young and quite early in your career. And I think you said that you first appeared in The Stage, which is the trade magazine for theatre, when you were 20, which is in 2020. How did that feel? What was that like?
It was so strange, so exciting. I did the interview in like these avocado pajamas that I have because it was just on the phone.
Them.
Probably. And I then got this, big picture of me on the stage, and it was just so weird to be recognized.
In the picture, were you in your avocado pajamas?
No, I wasn't in. Luckily, okay. It was like a headshot, luckily. Okay. And realistically, because it was the pandemic, it got a lot of eyes on it. And so a lot of people learned what I was doing and who I was. And that was really great. But yeah, it was so strange to be in that magazine that you're like, this is the big theatre magazine. This is the one that you read. This is now where I'm sort of a staple feature, I like to say.
A regular face in The Stage. But you said that you were trying to take a bit of a step back recently.
I care a lot about doing profile pieces, not for any kind of ego reason. Like, I know for a fact there are certain people that have certain opinions about me by virtue of the fact that I do opinion pieces. I'm very good at my job. Whether I talk to The Stage or any other magazine, it does not change whether I'm very good at my job. And that my focus at the end of the day is producing, and it's not about my profile. Not least because I think the most famous producers in the world, most normal people don't know who they are, and therefore it's such a unnecessary profile exercise if that's what you want to do. But the reason it's important to me is because there aren't any other producers working at the level I work at who look like me on the West End. That is the truth. And while I like to think that I'm audacious enough that I didn't necessarily need someone who looked like me in order to do this job, I also think it is really helpful to have someone that looks like you and go, I could do that. And so that's part of the reason why I do things like being in The Stage. And I did a show called Big Night of Musicals a couple of years ago on the BBC, and we were spotlighting The Wiz, and they were like, we'd like to talk to a couple of people, maybe a creative and some of the cast. And I remember being on a bus in London, and the show's filmed in Manchester like a week before, and saying, well, our director will be there and our choreographer. And this person on the phone was going, I hear you're quite young, and they were trying to get me to do it. And I sort of went, oh, but the director will be there and all this stuff. And they said, no, we would really like you to do it. And so I ended up doing that. And for me, for a lot of reasons, that was such a big deal, because one, I got actually quite like a few messages from people, but also knowing that as a kid, I would absolutely have watched that program because I really like musicals. It would have been insane to see like, but everybody else who was interviewed is famous. Like, it was like Keela Settle and Beverly Knight and then little me. And there's a lot in that that's really important to me. I talk about my age, and also like being a woman of color represented it there was really big for me. But also in it, I like purposefully held the microphone in a way that you can see my left hand, because I was born without a left hand. And that was like a huge deal for me, because that was just something I never saw at all growing up. I think there was sort of one actor. And so while I am trying to maybe protect myself a little bit more than I did before, I still think it's really important to be visible and be able to be visible in doing this job, so that people who look like me could go, I could do that. That's still really important to me. But it's never, it's never been the most important thing. I look back and I'm like, I was so young, but it was like 2 years ago. So I'm like, absolutely, I'm still young. But I think for a long time, a lot of people forgot that I was, a 20, 21-year-old, and were just sort of going, oh, well, everyone's paying attention to what you're doing next, or everyone's like got their eyes on you. And I went, I can't deal with that amount of pressure. And I'd had conversations with people that were about everything. And I have a lot of different identities, and I think I constantly was feeling like I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't doing enough for disabled artists, or I wasn't doing enough for Black artists, and I wasn't doing enough for women. And then I went, well, I'm one person. And realistically, like, the most powerful thing I can do as a producer, and as the person that brings people into the room, is bring people into the room that I want to platform, and bring people from underrepresented backgrounds in the arts into my rooms, and make sure they are the kind of rooms that I want to see in the rest of the industry. And if I keep doing that, it does have a knock-on effect.
In the video that you made around your birthday, you spoke about what we're talking about now. You spoke about that conscious decision to step back, to reframe, to put less pressure on yourself. And I think you even said to take things less personally. But you also said that when you first started doing it, you don't feel like you did a good job of it. What was the difficulty in that?
Everyone will always have an idea of you, and you can never control what that is. And it's hard, because most people want to be liked. You can absolutely pretend that you do not and be like, I don't care about anything. You do. Everybody wants people to like them. Even the person that's kind of a dick, you still want them to like you, because you want to be the exception and you want to be special. And so accepting that some people need, for their own reasons, to have a negative opinion of you, and that doesn't affect what you do or your actions, and that all you can control is that when they're talking to someone and going, they did all of these things, that all of the things that they list are going to either be untrue, or they're just going to be things where the other person goes, well, hold on a minute, none of that sounds bad. And I think I definitely found it really hard to go, oh, I can not care. I don't have to be friends with everyone. And particularly in an industry that's quite, I would say, sort of pseudo casual in the way that it acts. And because we work evenings, and because, there's sometimes like people will have meetings in like bars or coffee shop, all of these things. And so it's really easy for it to feel like a really casual industry, and like everybody is your friend. But actually, a lot of people are just your colleagues. And some people that you work brilliantly as colleagues are not your friends. And that's fine. And that's the same in every job. It's not being best friends with your colleague doesn't mean you hate them. And I think I was quite bad at going, some of these people are actually just just colleagues. And also, if I don't work with them again, or I don't really enjoy working with them, that's fine. I mean, it's hard. Like, that's hard work to do, to go, not everyone has to like me, and to really mean that. Yeah, and yeah, it really is about taking it less personally, in terms of going, somebody not liking you has very little to do with you. It's not because you're a problem. It's just because you're not meant to be friends. In the same way that, like, if I went on a date with someone and it didn't work out, I wouldn't go, well, I'm terrible. Yeah. I would go, okay, we just didn't really get on. We didn't have anything in common, and that's fine. And so moving past that and going, that thing isn't about me. That's about them.
Yeah. I mean, you seem so wise. And I think probably in your role as a producer, behind the scenes, you hold quite a lot of power. You are making lots of decisions that can impact people's careers. I guess people must see you as sort of a gateway to things sometimes. Do you ever feel that people in the industry meet you and then find out what your job is? And then is there ever a shift in sort of that relationship?
Yes. Yeah, I think this also comes from being quite young and being a woman, and like, there is absolutely this idea of a producer being an old white guy, and it's not that far from the truth, to be honest. But being a young woman and meeting people and them starting out by being like, oh, like, who are you and what do you do? Or just completely ignoring me, which is some people. And then somebody tells them who I am or what I do, and suddenly there's a huge shift. I think usually that happens quite early. And also, I'm quite a good judge of character, and I find it quite a helpful thing. But yeah, I've definitely had sort of friendships where it's very much predicated on, oh, will you produce my work? Will you give me a job? And there's always a moment where somebody jokes, well, you could just hire me. And it's so much the, like, death knell for a friendship for me, because I can't be in that relationship. And equally, I have some really great friends who are creatives in the industry, or who are actors in the industry, who have never said to me, well, could you hire me, or that sort of thing. And I like, those are people that I keep around, because we can talk about things and they can tell me about their work. And yes, one day we might work together, but equally,
it's not the foundation of the relationship.
Yeah, and it never feels like they're just trying to get something from you. And I think for some, some friendships, which I've probably left in the past now, that has been the case, and it becomes really obvious, and it's very difficult to maintain a friendship around that.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. One thing that I think that you do incredibly well, and that I think is a real marker of success and a successful person for me, is I think, at least from the outside, that you have really great boundaries. And so we are mostly Instagram friends. We mostly talk in DMs, because that's how I talk to everyone. But in order to arrange having you on this podcast, I sent you an email, and you sent me back an email saying, here's when I start working, here's when I stop working, here's when I'm willing to take my first meeting. And I was just like, yes, Ameena. You're not going to work in the evening just because someone asks you to. You're not going to... What time do you not take meetings before?
I don't take meetings from 10 to 11, and I started it quite recently. But also, I start work at 10, and people would ask for meetings at 9, and I would just say yes. And I realised that I don't want to do that or like that. But not having to do a meeting before 11 has hugely shifted my productivity. I've gotten so much more done. And somebody asked me if I'd missed anything or missed any meetings that were important because of it, and I haven't. Not one.
No, but if the meeting is important, then the person will respect you. If someone wanted a meeting with you when you weren't free for whatever reason, you can't have a meeting with her then. That's not on the table. That's not an option.
And it's also about trusting your team and trusting other people, because in the time that I've done that, there has been one meeting that was set early because it was the only time that everybody could do. And I said, I will miss it, but I'm happy for you to take it and update me when you get to it. And got an update, and I was like, great, I didn't need to be in that meeting, and that's fine. I definitely think that my boundaries have gotten better since I have a partner who doesn't work in the industry, and he is very good at being like, well, it's the end of the workday, or it's a weekend, why are you still working? And you just don't need, like, nothing is ever that urgent.
It's not.
Even when people are like, this has to go to print today, it doesn't.
And also, if it did, you should have asked me for it yesterday. I find that so frustrating. So I'm very similar. I've had an out of office on my emails since 2020, and it just says, I've got a lot of emails at the moment and I'll get back to you when I have fewer. And even when I do not have a big number of emails, I've just never taken it off, because I find that it just sets their expectations up of what I'm going to give them in a much better way. And so recently I was dealing with someone who kept emailing me and saying, I need this today, I need that today. And it was someone who was asking me to do quite a lot of work for no money at all. And they were at work, they were being paid for their work, and they wanted me to do something that they would then put online and that they would monetize and get ad revenue from. But they couldn't manage their own time enough to not consistently say to me, I need this in the next hour, I need this by the end of the day. And I don't think they knew what to do with me when I just said consistently, no. My new favourite phrase is, I'm really sorry to hear about your problems with time management. And it makes me feel I'm
that
so
is
naughty.
great. And that is so funny.
And my other favourite phrase that has kind of been replaced by sorry to hear about your problems with time management was, what's driving this deadline? So people would always say, I need this by then, and I need this, and it's urgent. But my background is in advertising agencies, and everything is always urgent, and no one ever has any money. But if you've left it until it's urgent, either you've done something wrong or you've made up the deadline. And often I find when you push back and you say, actually, you can't have that today, they're like, oh, next week? I'm like, okay, so you gave me a made up deadline. I'm not dealing with that. And I really love that you, from the outset, set out, here's what I'm willing to do and here's what I'm not. And for me, I found that the people who were put out by me saying, you cannot have this today, are the same people who, when I've had to email around this week and say, I've got COVID, I'm sorry, I can't come to your thing, they just haven't replied. They haven't said, oh, I hope you feel better. They haven't said anything. They've just radio silence. And they're just not people that we need around, I think, people who can't respect our boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they're really important. And also just in terms of going, oh, this is moving from Instagram, I consistently have to tell people, cool, can you send me an email about this? Because if it's in my Instagram DMs, it is not work related. Most of my Instagram DMs are me sending memes and dogs and things like that to my friends. That is what it is. That's what it's for. It's not a good space for me to be like, oh, I need to email this person back. You're going to get lost, and then that's going to be it. And I think that sort of comes from that casual culture of well, I just need this little thing from you. And I found that most people are really respectful of that and really understanding. So it's sort of, it's another boundary that I try and set about social media is social media. And while I do sort of use it for work things, it's mostly my personal life. I'm not an influencer. It's not what I do.
I will say I have tried to make Ameena be an influencer on occasion. So around Christmas, Ameena sometimes sends me pictures of an advent calendar type setup, because I love and request from everyone, if you're doing an advent calendar, I need to see it. It's my favourite thing about the season. And Ameena does such good unboxing videos that every year I'm like, influencer now? She's like, no, thank you.
I can't. It's too much work.
So much work.
I know that nobody else thinks this, but I really don't want to do that because I want to go on holiday. That's the main reason. I want to be able to go on holiday and not be I need to film absolutely everything and I need to get some shots of me being whoosh in the ocean or whatever else.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I've been on holiday with influencers. Oh, maybe this sounds like a brag, but it's not. I went on a cruise that was gifted to a group of influencers. And I'm not that kind of influencer. I'm not someone who's there to sort of show you, my haircut or my lipstick, to the extent that I can't even pull off the top of my head, what influencers talk about. And it was really interesting because it was free. We had to pay for an amount of tax on it, which you have to pay on anything that's gifted. But in return, we had to do quite a lot of content. We had to do regular posting to our stories and to our grids and all of this. And so we're all posting oh, it's so great and I'm relaxing in this hammock and it's lovely and we're at sea. but you've set up a tripod, you've packed a tripod in your suitcase,
Yeah.
and there's no Wi-Fi on the ship, but you have to upload every day. And like, we are saying, like, you know, look how successful and relaxed I am in the ocean. And really, we're all like, can I get on your data? Can you hotspot me? It's a scam. It's a sham.
It's hard. It's difficult.
It's hard.
Food influencers get gifted, I think, something like some of them do like 4 or 5 meals in a day, and a lot of them don't eat any of the food. And that's devastating. That's so much wasted food. But yeah.
I know someone who can't drive who was gifted a car. Why?
That's wild.
Why? I'm going to have to pay loads of I think influencers maybe don't know that they're meant to pay tax on stuff. And I think maybe once they realise, or once that becomes more enforced, maybe people will have a little bit less gifting. I mean, I do take the gifts, and then I don't always post about it. And then I'm not giving the brands what they want. But to me, actually, that does feel a bit like success, because I feel like, well, you came to me, I didn't go to you, and this is my terms. I'll post about it if I want. Surprise, I don't.
That's good.
Yeah. So you have done so many things. You've been in so many newspapers and magazines, and you've had so much coverage, and you have produced shows on the West End, and you've done all of these amazing things. And I wanted to ask, to me, from the outside, you seem incredibly successful. You were one of the very first people I put on my list, and I was like, I want to talk to successful people. And I was just like, I don't know if Ameena is too busy to talk to me. She's this big successful lady. And so I wanted to say, from the outside, you seem incredibly successful. Do you feel successful internally?
I've been thinking about this a little bit. I think I do, but probably not in a way that most people expect. What I've realised is that being successful is about being successful at multiple points along a journey. And it's not an end moment of, now I am successful and this is how I feel. Because I definitely think that even if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have went, oh, I'm not successful. But having thought about it more, looking back on where I started to now, absolutely I am successful. Do I have a way to go? Yes. Will I be successful when I get to that point? Yes. But the thing that I think I've realized the most now is that what I found is that my life balance has become so much better, and I feel so much happier and more secure. And that, to me, is what being successful is going, I'm at a really like nice point in my career for my age, or for my experience, or for all of these things. I'm at a very nice point in my career. I'm also at a very nice point in my life for that. And taking that together, I do feel successful. But I think it also varies day to day. Like, I think maybe tomorrow I won't.
Yeah, I think that's so valid. And I really resonate with what you said about there not being an end moment. Like, success is having these moments along this journey, along this pathway, along this fuller life experience. And I think you're really right. And I think it's not fair. I think when I was younger and I was thinking about success, I thought I could do like a couple of things and then I would be successful. And so one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is I've written all these books, I've done a TED Talk, I've been a UN delegate twice, I've been a chief operating officer, I've done all of these things, and I still didn't feel successful. I still don't feel successful. And maybe if I came on a podcast like this, we could ask questions and I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. But then, you know, when I go to bed, when I'm thinking about what I have to do next, I still feel really worried, and I still feel like I still have to do so much. And whilst I understand, and I'm coming to understand more that is how it works, I feel like it's a scam. I feel like the way that people think about success is, you know, you can do this thing once and then you are, you know, trademark successful forever. And I'm starting to realize that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, it's definitely a scam. Yeah, that definitely resonates. I think if I stayed at this same level for 10 more years, I probably would still be successful, but that wouldn't be successful to me. And I think really, like, success is growing to fill the path that comes to meet you, and taking on new challenges and all of that. But that's what success is for me. And for somebody else, success is just like getting to the point that I'm at in 10 years time, or getting to a certain level. For some people, success is middle management, and that is absolutely fine. What your vision of success is can be consistency. And I think that for a long time really was what I wanted, because a lot of the time I said, well, what I want to do and what my goal is, which really annoyed my coach when I had one, is that I just want to keep producing shows, and that's just what I want to keep doing. And I realized that actually, like, that is true. For me, success is consistently producing shows at larger scales, but there is a point where I top out of the scale so that I can produce a show at. And if I then am doing, more work and continuing to do that, that's not me, decreasing in success level, but it's all about that growing to meet that path and coming to the point of going, oh, okay, where I am at right now is good, and celebrating that. And if you're not happy with where you're at right now and you don't feel super successful, that's totally fine, but make sure that you're running on your own metric of success and not on somebody else's, because I think it's so easy. And when you're a kid and you're trying to run up that hill of GCSEs and A levels and university and all of these things that people have set out for you, make sure that you're doing it to your own metric, because I can pretend that like getting all A stars was what I really wanted, but it's just what people told me I should want, and it didn't matter in the long run. And I still went to a really good university, even though I missed all of my grades originally. And so finding out what your level of success is, whether that's middle management, whether that's consistently being in a job, whether that's this feels very unachievable these days, but buying a house, or buying a sofa, or buying a bed, like whatever that level of success is for you, that's totally fine. Because it doesn't have to be, I want to be married and have 4 kids and have a house and have the top CEO job. Like, that's maybe somebody's vision of success, certainly not mine.
No, mine
and
either.
That's the thing, is learning that success isn't actually this big perfect moment in the sun that you get, but is just a load of little moments where you're in the right place at the right time and you're on the right trajectory and you feel really good, and then it goes away and then it comes back again and then it goes away. And the core of that is, this is how I'd like to feel. Because as I say, like, I think I've moved a lot from being very goal oriented and learning more about like the moment and how I feel in that moment and being happy and like what that means. And that pocket of, I feel really happy right now with where I'm at, that's what success is.
Yeah, it's so good. And I'm really glad that that's where you sort of brought it back to, because you talked a little bit about success outside of work earlier on in our conversation. And I'm sorry that we haven't like come back into that sort of in more depth, because I think that is so valid and so important. You can be the best job title in the world, but you could be having a terrible time there. I think we do focus too much on those sort of professional successes, but you're happy and you're having a good time, and you have chosen to sort of put up some boundaries. I was going to say step away a bit, but I think I want to say like save a bit of you for yourself, and that feels like a really important thing. Thank you for being such an amazing guest. Just before we go, as always, I say as always, this is the second one of these I've recorded, but as always, we're going to end with our quickfire questions. So, it's quickfire time. So you've got this really amazing list of creds that we read out at the beginning and all these things that you've achieved. Aside from your A-levels, has there been anything that you wanted, that you worked for, or that you were aiming for that just didn't quite happen in the end?
Yes, definitely. Several shows, several projects that have just been like lost to history, or ran out of time, or the pandemic meant that they were no longer relevant. There's a lot of projects in that sort of like drafts folder.
Where and when do you feel the most successful?
Ooh, this is a good question. I think when I'm in my element, and this can be anything from like writing a really good email to doing a really good spreadsheet to speaking on stage. When you're in that moment and you're like, I did a really good job of that, whatever that may be, that's when I feel most successful.
Is there anything that you worked really hard for and achieved, but it didn't feel quite how you would imagined it would feel when you were working for it?
Ooh. Probably my degree. I ended up getting a first. I always say kind of by accident, but that's not true. I obviously worked quite hard for it. But I had set the goal of getting a 2-1 because of crying on all of those results days. And I got this first and I just was sort of like, I just feel like that has to be a mistake because I was doing other things and I can't have also gotten a first. So it felt very like surprising instead of feeling like, yeah, I've done it and I've worked for it.
I bet you worked incredibly hard.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in that library, so that's...
And then finally, what's something that you have achieved that doesn't make the bio, that doesn't make that list of creds that we read out, but you think is still a success that we should celebrate?
Do you know what? Yesterday I finished doing a beginner's course in pole fitness. And as a person with one hand, I definitely thought I wouldn't be able to do anything, thought I wouldn't be able to really do any moves. And having like learned how strong I actually am and how graceful I can be, I think, yeah, it'll never end up on my bio, but it's definitely something I'm super proud of.
So good. And I've actually seen some of this on your Instagram and it looks amazing. Every time I see you doing it, I'm like, yes, go on, Ameena.
It's so much fun.
Ameena Hamid, thank you so much for joining me today. You've been an amazing guest. Where can people find out more about your work? Where can people see your shows? How can people, what are you working on? What do you want us to know?
I have a website, which is just ameenahamidproductions.com, and that lists all of my shows. But the thing that's coming up soonest is that I'm taking a show called Why Am I So Single by Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss, who wrote Six, to the Garrick Theatre, and it opens on August 27th. It's a really fun show, a great night out, and I'm very proud of it.
Amazing. Okay, well, we need to go and support as much as we can. So thank you again, Ameena, and I can't wait to speak to you offline again soon. That was the wonderful Ameena Hamid, and that's the end of the second episode of Welcome to Successville. Thanks so much for listening and for coming on this journey with me. I'm putting links to Ameena's website and her upcoming show, Why Am I So Single, in the show notes if you want to spend more time with her. If you want to spend more time with me too, you can find me on Instagram at @SophieWilliamsOfficial, which is also where you can send in a voice note if you'd like to share your own thoughts or feelings about success, or if you just want to celebrate a win. I'm just getting started on planning season 2, and this way you can also be a part of it. You can also email me on welcometosuccessville@gmail.com if you don't want your message to be limited to 60 seconds. So that's a voice message to @SophieWilliamsOfficial on Instagram, or you can email it to welcometosuccessville@gmail.com if you don't want to worry about it being 60 seconds. As always, you get bonus points if you begin your message with "Hello Sophie" and "Successful guest." I'll be back next week when I'll be joined by actor Rebecca Humphreys, who you might recognise from some of your favourite TV shows or from her book Why Did You Stay?, which was an immediate bestseller. In the meantime, ratings and reviews are really helpful for a brand new project like this, especially if we want it to be successful. So if you are able to rate, review or tell a friend, then that would be really appreciated. And I'll see you next week, lovely listeners.